Hey gamers, this is John, host of Video Games and the World. 2019 is right down the road, so this episode is dedicated to the year 1998. That's right, 1998 was an iconic year in gaming history, because in that year the best games for consoles such as the N64 and the Sony PlayStation were released, as well as on PC and also the appearance of the Game Boy Color. I was 12 in 1998, and to me, it was a great year for me in gaming. That year was not only a hit in gaming, but also in movies. 1998 had great movies such as Armageddon, Saving Private Ryan, Mulan, The Mask of Zorro, American History X, Basketball, Blade, Rush Hour, Shakespeare in Love, and Lethal Weapon 4. But enough now. Let us begin our journey back to the 90s with this episode. Enjoy. 1998. I'll never forget it. It has been 2 years after the Nintendo 64 was first released and 3 after the PlayStation was released. Both consoles were competing for the top spot. Many were on the side of the N64 because people could play not just for 2, but 4 players, while the PS1 only had 2 players. But still, both consoles had great titles, but let us not forget that PC games were becoming something big as well. It was also the year where technology and graphics began to evolve. Graphics in gaming were wowing many gamers. It was the year where 2 of the most iconic games of their own series have entered into glorious 3D. Rockstar Games, known for the Grand Theft Auto franchise, the Manhunt games, the Warriors, Red Dead series, and many more, was founded on that same year. The Sega at that time in Japan released the Sega Dreamcast. Last but not least, the Game Boy would have a colored version called the Game Boy Color, and some of the Game Boy's greatest titles were re-released in colors. 1998 was also the year where the first version of the Unreal Engine was released with Epic's first-person shooter of the same name. The technology would go on to power hundreds of games including BioShock, Gears of War, and Mass Effect. Now, let us talk about the best games of 1998. Metal Gear Solid. We all remember that the first Metal Gear Solid became an instant success. The Metal Gear franchise first started in 8-bit graphics back in the 80s. The first Metal Gear game was intended to be an action game that featured modern military combat. However, the MSX2's hardware limited the number of on-screen bullets and enemies, which Hideo Kojima felt impeded the combat aspect. After the second Metal Gear game, Kojima was about to make Metal Gear 3 for the 3DO. Of course, Metal Gear had an NES version with Snake's Revenge being its sequel. Although praised, the praise was not as high as the MSX2 versions. How Metal Gear Solid was born? It all started when Kojima was making Metal Gear 3, but then the 3DO was discontinued and shifted to PlayStation after Policenauts was released. The game was titled Metal Gear Solid rather than 3 due to the fact that the MSX2 versions of the previous Metal Gear games were not widely released, particularly Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which was only released in Japan and was not ported to any other platform at the time. An unrelated sequel to the first Metal Gear titled Snake's Revenge was released outside of Japan for the NES instead, which was developed without Kojima's involvement. The word solid was chosen due to the switch from 2D to 3D computer graphics. Development for Metal Gear Solid began in mid-1995 with the intention of creating the best PlayStation game ever. Developers aimed for accuracy and realism while making the game enjoyable and tense. In the early stages of development, the Huntington Beach SWAT team educated the creators with a demonstration of vehicles, weapons, and explosives. Weapons expert Motosada Mori was also tapped as technical advisor in the research, which included visits to Fort Irwin and firing sessions at Stembridge Gun Rentals. Kojima stated that if the player isn't tricked into believing that the world is real, then there's no point in making the game. To fulfill this, adjustments were made to every detail, such as individually designed desks. Metal Gear Solid, published and developed by Konami and released in Japan in September 3, 1998. The game was then released on American shores on October 21, 1998. Metal Gear Solid opened up a new chapter, concept, gameplay, and a far more amazing experience with 3D action. In terms of storyline, the game takes place many years after the events of Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake. Metal Gear Solid opened up a new door in the genre of espionage in video games. This genre is called Tactical Espionage Action. The game was critically and commercially successful, which sold over 6 million copies. Metal Gear Solid spawned a sequel released in 2001 titled Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. However, after the September 11 attacks, its release was delayed to November. In 2004, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater was released as a prequel to the series. The story was about the origins of Big Boss, Revolver Ocelot, and the Patriots. 4 years later, we would see Solid Snake in action for one last time in Guns of the Patriots. There were other prequels that were a success, such as Peace Walker, Ground Zeroes, and Phantom Pain. Metal Gear Solid is remembered as one of the first truly cinematic video games. Its numerous, lengthy cutscenes dramatically recreated filmic techniques, and its characters were brought to life with complete voice acting. We shall always remember how the voice of David Hayter made Snake very epic. Of course, Pat Zimmerman was born to be the one and only Revolver Ocelot, as well as Cam Clark being Liquid Snake. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. After many years of being rendered in sprites, The Legend of Zelda would finally enter the realm of 3D. The game is very well remembered for its great story, rich designs, memorable music, and great moments as well. In terms of the controls, Link will perform new moves such as targeting with a Z button, switching to first person and using the slingshot, bow, or the hook shot. Also, we saw new moves such as side jumping, rolling, and backflips. Link would also use jump attacks while Z targeting while heading towards an enemy and pressing the attack button. The side quests are also very memorable, such as hunting for gold Skulltulas, heart pieces, mass deliverings, and so on. Ocarina of Time was going to have Ura Zelda for the Nintendo 64DD, but unfortunately, the 64DD was never released. But years later on the GameCube, we will have Master Quest, a tougher version of the game with rearranged dungeons. A great memory I have from the game is how there were rumors of finding the Triforce. A lot of us fell for it, because these rumors were false. Wow, talk about smacking around one's ego. Anyways, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was re-released in 2011 on the Nintendo 3DS with updated graphics, a boss challenge mode, touchscreen and gyroscope controls, and a modified version of the Water Temple with reduced difficulty. Ocarina of Time remains a very popular Zelda title up until this day, and Navi? She was a real pain in the ass. Despite its popularity, the game was accused of controversy due to the following. The Fire Temple's music sampled a group of men chanting Islamic prayer. This was removed from later versions of the game by Nintendo because of the religious association. The name of Allah can be heard clearly at one point. Another Arabic allusion that was deciphered was, "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah." It was replaced by a MIDI synthesizer in later releases, ports, and remakes. The chants that are heard in the original N64 version are the following. "In the name of Allah, the Beneficent and Merciful, there is no God but Allah, and also Allah willing." The second religious reference in Ocarina of Time was the Gerudo symbol, which was far more widespread as it appeared as a motive on several elements through the game, including blocks, switches, and the mirror shield. This symbol was similar but not identical to the star and crescent symbol that is prominent in the Islam religion, the Muslim community in general, and several national flags in Asia. Some of the differences between the two symbols include the Islamic version has a 5-point star, while the Gerudo version has 4 points. The Islamic crescent faces to the right, and is not as complete or close as the Gerudo one, which faces to the left. And many Islamic crescents have the star deeper in it, and not at the edge like the Gerudo version does. In any case, due to the religious meaning of the symbol, Nintendo edited out all in its spots in the game, with a single exception. The newer Gerudo symbol has been a staple in modern revisions of Ocarina of Time. Another Ocarina of Time issue revolved around Ganondorf's blood. In the original version, after his defeat at the top of his lair, he vomited red blood, after Link stabs the Master Sword in his forehead. Blood drops shed as well. In later versions, the color of the blood was changed to green. Still, Ocarina of Time remains as one of the most celebrated titles of the franchise. Some would say that A Link to the Past is better, or Twilight Princess, or Skyward Sword, or Breath of the Wild, but Ocarina of Time still has the title of being the best of the series. Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Long before the Disney era, Star Wars had many video games that were awesome, while others, of course, were pretty crappy. Of course, we remember Dark Forces before it was retold as Rogue One, and also Shadows of the Empire taking place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But this is about Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Star Wars Rogue Squadron is a 3D flying shoot-'em-up video game that was released on the Nintendo 64 and a PC. The game was released on December 7th of 1998, and it is one of the best Star Wars games ever made by LucasArts and Factor 5. Rogue Squadron was developed after the success of Shadows of the Empire for both PC and N64, and Factor 5 was behind the development, in which LucasArts was pleased with the early collaborations of the company. The game also allowed high resolution with the use of Nintendo 64's expansion pack. Star Wars Rogue Squadron is an arcade-like video game in which players take the role of Luke Skywalker in 14 different missions, and also as Wedge Antilles in the last mission. Players get to fly 5 ships: the X-Wing, the A-Wing, the Speeder, the Y-Wing, and finally the V-Wing. Through cheats, players can fly the Millennium Falcon, the TIE Interceptor, and with a special cheat, the Naboo Starfighter. Players unlock 3 secret stages depending on the medals they collected, whether they're bronze, silver, or gold. The 3 secret missions are the Race Through Banger's Canyon, the Death Star Trench Run, and the Battle of Hoth. This game was incredibly well done and the gameplay is really good. A cheat code, Chicken, unlocks a secret stage in which you play as an AT-ST, destroying bases and ships of the Rebel Alliance. A hilarious cheat is converting the V-Wing into a car. As for the story of the game, Rogue Squadron takes place between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. It's about Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles forming Rogue Squadron, comprised of the best pilots of the Rebel Alliance, in which they take missions to hit Imperial targets in order to destroy the tyrannical Galactic Empire. The game is comprised of 4 chapters which involves 15 missions. Players must complete various objectives through 15 different missions, including the 3 secret missions that can be unlocked either through cheats or getting respective medals. Collecting medals can be achieved by beating the stage under a specific time limit. So, if you want to get a gold medal, you have to be swift and have impressive flying abilities and shooting skills as well, and accuracy. The game is just like Star Fox, except that this is Star Wars. The game's graphics are rendered in 3D, and walking people look more like a mixture between 3D rendered characters and sprites. When players insert the expansion pack into the N64's jumper pack slot, graphics go from low to a higher resolution, giving an exciting experience and altered sequences never seen before. Star Wars Rogue Squadron was the first game of the Rogue Squadron series that started in 1998. The game was more successful than Shadows of the Empire, and it spawned comic books as well. The second game, Rogue Leader, was released in 2001 on the Nintendo GameCube, and it was also praised for its gameplay and graphics. The third game was even better. Rebel Strike, allowed players for the first time to battle on ground combat or in vehicles. There are Star Wars games that are epic, but some of them, like Dark Forces, are a different story in a certain way. Pokemon Red and Blue. Pokemon Red and Blue were originally released in Japan in 1996. However, the two games reached American shores in 1998. When Pokemon was first released 2 years later, it became an instant worldwide phenomenon, spawning a trading card game, anime shows, movies, and even manga as well. Players take the role of the Pokemon trainer and travel throughout Kanto. They visit various towns, villages, cities, and many other areas, capturing all kinds of Pokemon, battling rival trainers, gym leaders, and so on. Sometimes they will encounter Team Rocket, an evil organization that seeks to capture Pokemon in order to exploit them. At times, it has even killed Pokemon. Their oath, as posted on the wall of one of their many bases, is steal Pokemon for profit, exploit Pokemon for profit. All Pokemon exist for the glory of Team Rocket. Their ultimate goal is to take over the world using Pokemon. After getting all badges, players can go to the Pokemon League to face the Elite Four and finally their rival. Pokemon didn't only have handheld games, it also had console games on the N64 like Hey You Pikachu, Pokemon Puzzle League, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. Pokemania continues to shine even today. Despite its massive popularity, it was the target of religious groups, cultural critics like Carol Boston Weatherford, animal rights activists like PETA, and self-proclaimed psychic Uri Geller. They were all debunked. But Uri Geller, well, he was debunked way before Pokemon existed by the one and only James Randi. Not to forget, one of its most well-known controversies is the episode Electric Soldier Porygon. It is an episode that sent over 600 children to the hospital due to seizures caused by the infamous scene where Pikachu destroys the missiles, causing these rapid flashing strobes of light that were extremely bright. Since then, that episode was never aired again in Japan or in any other place in the world. Now, if you're going to watch it on YouTube, make sure that the room is brightly lit and keep yourself as far away from the screen as possible, okay? To debunk and correct these people who went after Pokemon, Pokemon are not even real, and there is nothing of the devil in that show. Besides, games, movies, and TV shows tend to emulate real life and make references to it. As for comparing to dogfighting and cockfights, Pokemon duels are friendly and not to the death. Pokemon encourages people to never give up on their dreams even if the outcome looks bleak. Pokemon also talks about friendship and bonding, not only with these creatures but people as well. Pokemon continues to be massively popular up until this day. Resident Evil 2. Released on January 21st, 1998 on the PlayStation, then in 1999 for the Nintendo 64, for the Dreamcast in 2000, and for the GameCube in early 2003. This is a sequel to the original Resident Evil released in 1996 on the PlayStation, and it is considered to be the most popular game in horror genre. It has wowed and scared many die-hard Resident Evil fans worldwide, and also a target of controversy due to its high level of graphic violence and gore. Resident Evil 2 introduced two new characters, Leon S. Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Leon is a rookie police officer who heads to the city on his first day in the job, while Claire Redfield, a college student who loves riding motorcycles, heads to town to search for her lost brother Chris. However, before the final game was released, there was a beta title called Resident Evil 1.5. In that game there was Leon, but there was also a motorcyclist like Claire, but not related to Chris. Her name was Elsa Walker. So, the story takes place 2 months after the mansion incident. The T-virus broke out in the nearby mountain community of Raccoon City and hit the peaceful little town, turning its residents into flesh-starved zombies and bloodthirsty monsters. Everyone still remembers the ad for the game, It was awesome and filmed by legendary Dead Series creator George A. Romero, may he rest in peace, in which Leon S. Kennedy was played by the late Brad Renfro, and Claire Redfield was played by Adrienne Frantz from The Young and the Restless. Most memorable moments are being scared the crap out of by the Laker whenever he made a surprise attack, and also that of the robotic tyrant called Mr. X. The Resident Evil 2 remake will be released on January 25th of 2019, after 21 long years of its original release. I'm gonna get heat for saying this, but the jump scares in this remake, I think they were trying way too hard. But we shall see what happens. The jump scares in the original, in my honest opinion, were more natural. And like I said, this is just my opinion, ladies and gentlemen. My own opinion. If you think the jump scares are gonna be something new and they might be as natural as the old one, then that is you. Okay? Gran Turismo. Gran Turismo is one of the most iconic racing video games of all time, long before Forza Motorsport ever existed, and it was way more popular than San Francisco Rush. The game featured arcade and simulation modes. In the arcade mode, the player can freely choose the courses and vehicles they wish to use. Winning races unlocks additional cars and courses. However, simulation mode requires the player to earn different levels of the driver's licenses in order to qualify for events and earn credits, trophies, and prize cards by winning race championships. Winning one particular championship also unlocks a video and a few additional demonstration tracks. Credits can be used to purchase additional vehicles and for parts and tuning. Gran Turismo features 140 cars and 11 racetracks. 2 Honda NSX cars from 1992 were included in the Japanese version, but were removed from the North American and European versions. There is also a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette and a 1998 Mazda Roadster exclusive to the arcade mode. The game required 5 years to complete. During an interview with Kazunori Yamauchi, it was revealed that development of Gran Turismo started in the second half of 1992. Yamauchi-san added that at different times there were only 7 to 15 people assisting him. When asked how difficult it was to create Gran Turismo, Yamauchi remarked, "It took 5 years. In those 5 years, we could not see the end. I would wake up at work, go to sleep at work. It was getting cold, so I knew it must be winter. I estimate I was home only 4 days a year." Wow. Sound design was one aspect that Yamauchi believed was compromised due to lack of time. Although Kazunori considered the game's artificial intelligence to be superior to its competitors, he remained unsatisfied with its development. While Gran Turismo was released in Japan, Polyphony Digital was still a development group within Sony Computer Entertainment. The studio was established in April 1998 before the Western release of the game. Yamauchi estimated that Gran Turismo utilized around 75% of the PlayStation's maximum performance. The game received critical acclaim worldwide. It won Best Driving Game, Best Graphics at the PlayStation Magazine in 1999. It also won Best Graphics at the Spotlight Awards. It spawned various sequels for the PlayStation, and its recent game released last year was Gran Turismo Sport, which is VR compatible. Baldur's Gate. This is where BioWare began with RPGs. Baldur's Gate was the developer's first foray into RPG long before Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect ever existed. It played a vital role in reviving the RPG genre on PC. The game has spawned 2 series, known as the Ballspawn Saga and the Dark Alliance, both taking place mostly within the Western Heartlands. But the Ballspawn Saga extends to Am and Tether. The Dark Alliance series was released for consoles and was critically and commercially successful. The Ballspawn Saga was critically acclaimed for using pausable real-time gameplay, which is credited with revitalizing the computer role-playing game genre. The game was not about saving the world, saving the damsel in distress, or killing the bad guy. It was about becoming the best that you could be. And that was pretty interesting in so many ways. Not every RPG game is about saving the world and getting the girl, but becoming the best. It was also a game that successfully translated the complex Dungeons and Dragons rule set into something that worked well on a platform, making its stats heavy backbone accurate and accessible. Half-Life. While GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64 was played by so many gamers, Valve came up with the idea of a first-person shooter of its own, Half-Life. In Half-Life, players take the role of physicist Gordon Freeman, who must fight his way out of the Black Mesa research facility after an experiment goes wrong, fighting enemies and solving puzzles. Unlike many other games at the time, the player has almost complete uninterrupted control of Freeman, and the story is told mostly through scripted sequences seen through his eyes. Valve co-founder Gabe Newell said the team aimed to create an immersive world rather than a shooting gallery. The game's engine, Gold SRC, is a heavily modified version of the Quake engine licensed from ID Software. Half-Life received critical acclaim for its graphics, realistic gameplay, and seamless narrative. It won over 50 PC Game of the Year awards and is considered one of the greatest video games of all time. It influenced first-person shooters for years after its release. Half-Life had sold 8 million copies by November 16 of 2004 and 9.3 million copies by December of 2008. It was ported to the PlayStation 2 in 2001 and OS X and Linux in 2013. It was followed in 2004 by Half-Life 2. Half-Life was also ported on the PlayStation 2 by Gearbox Software and released in 2001. This game had a significant overhaul in terms of both character models, weapons, and more advanced and extended levels and general map geometry incorporated from work on a planned Dreamcast version. Also added in is a head-to-head play and a co-op expansion called Half-Life Decay that allowed players to play as two female scientists, Dr. Cross and Dr. Green, at Black Mesa. Another interesting feature allowed players to use a USB mouse and a keyboard, a feature previously unused on the platform. An interesting fun fact is this. In the HBO TV series, Looking, Jonathan Groff, who played as game designer Patrick Murray in the show, was cosplaying as Gordon Freeman. I wasn't a watcher of the show, but some of my friends were. I must say, he looked kinda cool. Parasite Eve. What happens when you combine Resident Evil and Final Fantasy? That's right, Parasite Eve. The game is a sequel to the novel Parasite Eve written by Hideaki Sena. It is also the first game in the Parasite Eve video game series. The story follows New York City police officer Aya Brea over a 6-day span in 1997 as she attempts to stop the Eve, a woman who plans to destroy the human race through spontaneous human combustion. Players explore levels set in areas of New York while utilizing a possible real-time combat system along with several role-playing game elements. Parasite Eve was Squaresoft's first M-rated game and the first major American and Japanese game development collaboration for the company. It was produced by Hironobu Sakaguchi and directed by Takashi Tokita. Music for the title was composed by Yoko Shimomura, who was widely acclaimed for her work to create an inorganic and emotionless soundtrack that saw 2 album releases. Parasite Eve received positive reviews. Critics praised the graphics and gameplay, but found the overall game too linear and with little replay potential. The game was produced by Hironobu Sakaguchi and directed by Takashi Tokita, as said earlier. During development of the game, Square decided to use New York City as a setting after having been previously considered for use in Final Fantasy VII. Aya Brea was created by Hironobu Sakaguchi and designed by Tetsuya Nomura. Aya was originally being designed by someone else, but the original sketches did not satisfy Sakaguchi-san, who had wanted long-haired character like Aerith Gainsborough, a central character from Final Fantasy VII. At the time, he was creating another unspecified character for a different project, who sported short hair. He got confused while designing them and accidentally combined the two designs, creating the then current Aya. The original concept for her was to have her as strong, sexy, and bewitching. Yoko Shimomura had composed the music for the game long before she composed for Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy XV. Not to forget that she composed for various Mario games. Parasite Eve was an instant success upon its release and spawned 2 sequels, such as Parasite Eve 2 and The Third Birthday. Spyro the Dragon. One of Insomniac Games' greatest titles of all time before Resistance: Fall of Man and the recent hit Spider-Man. Now, we know that Nintendo 64 had games aimed at kids, while the PlayStation was aimed at teenagers and mature gamers. This title not only impressed kids but also teenagers and adults as well, and received critical success. Spyro the Dragon puts players in the control of the titular Spyro as he travels across various worlds in order to rescue his fellow dragons, recover the stolen treasure, and defeat the evil Nasty Norg. Spyro has 2 main attacks, breathing fire and charging with his horns, which must be strategically used for defeating enemies and smashing open crates. Charging can be used against many small enemies, but not against larger enemies. Likewise, fire is capable of defeating larger enemies but can be blocked by enemies that use metal armor. Spyro is also able to glide whilst jumping to reach new areas, with some levels allowing him to fly freely in the air. Spyro's health is represented by the color of his dragonfly partner, Sparks, who also helps him pick up nearby treasure. Taking damage will cause Sparks to lose his color and disappear, leaving Spyro vulnerable, but he can recover health by eating butterflies spawned by defeating small animals. This game will be included as part of the greatest hits lineup of budgeted releases such as Crash Bandicoot, Gran Turismo, Twisted Metal 3, Cool Borders, Metal Gear Solid, and so on. The game spawned sequels and also The Legend of Spyro. Spyro would also become another PlayStation mascot alongside Crash Bandicoot. And just recently, and on time for its 20th anniversary, Spyro the Dragon, alongside its sequels, was remastered as Spyro Reignited Trilogy. There were various great titles of 1998 that spawned a franchise or need to come back with a reboot, and these are the following. StarCraft. It was first released on PC in March of 1998, and 2 years later on the N64. It was a military real-time strategy developed by Blizzard Entertainment long before World of Warcraft and Overwatch ever existed. Work on the game started shortly after Warcraft 2: Tides of Darkness, released in 1995. StarCraft debuted at the 1996 E3, where it was unfavorably compared to Warcraft 2. As a result, the project was entirely overhauled and then showcased to the public in early 1997, receiving a far more positive response. The success of the game spawned a franchise, and the game's multiplayer is popular in South Korea, where players play the game in professional competitions, earn sponsorships, and compete in televised tournaments. Banjo-Kazooie. Super Mario 64 was very popular, and so was this game developed by Rare. Rare is known for creating masterpieces such as Donkey Kong series, GoldenEye, Jet Force Gemini, and Perfect Dark. The game was fun, exciting, quirky, the graphics were fantastically colorful, and the dialogues were insanely humorous. Banjo and Kazooie themselves were gifted with numerous abilities that complemented one another in interesting ways, while additional abilities were unlocked the further into the game you progressed, something entirely new for the time. Put simply, Banjo-Kazooie is Rare at their best. Other well-remembered games of 1998 were Grim Fandango, Final Fantasy Tactics, Thief, The Dark Project, WCW NWO Revenge, Vigilante 8, Xenogears, Star Ocean The Second Story, Oddworld Apes Exodus, and so many more. And finally, to wrap this up, I feel very old remembering all these awesome titles of gaming in 1998. I was only 12 years old and started to learn to develop crushes on girls that I liked, the awesome movies, and all these awesome shows from 1998 on the WB11 before it was called the CW being played with superhero TV shows. But hey, I like the Arrowverse shows and Black Lightning too, although they can be too overtly political most times. Yeesh. If you were a person born in the 80s and raised in the 90s like I was, then I'm sure you played and loved most of these games. That goes for early 90s babies as well. But hey, some gamers born in the late 90s and raised in the 2000s love these old games, and it's good to see many of them getting the remastered or remake treatment. Until next time, gamers, don't forget to comment, rate, share, and subscribe. This is John, host of Video Games in the World. Have a good one. Bye-bye.